Chapter 4, The Monster. "Time to wake up," Tamaj's father called from the hall. "We have an appointment with the monster." Tamaj stretched in his bedroom and squinted at the clock. It was 6 in the morning and the first Saturday of the summer. It was time to go fishing for the monster, something he'd been doing with his dad every summer for as long as he could remember. His door opened. Dad tossed a snack bar onto his bed. "Breakfast. Let's go." After Tamaj got dressed, he headed out back, where Wallamaloo Lake awaited them. Dad was on the dock loading the old motorboat. "Conditions are perfect. Today is the day." "I can just feel it," Tamaj finished. He smiled. His dad always said that. Suddenly, Dad's face turned serious. "Today is the day, Tamaj." He brought his special fishing rod on board. It was the deep sea fishing kind, especially meant for the monster. "20 years ago, I swore I'd get him, and I will." He gave the barrel of the rod a pat. Tamaj took his place on the rear bench. "You think we're finally going to catch him?" He surveyed the dark, murky water around him. "I have to." Dad pushed the boat away from the dock. Tamaj had never seen his father look more determined to catch the mysterious fish. Legend had it that the monster was big enough to eat a dog. It could jump 50 feet out of the water and overturn a boat. The stories were so embedded in everyone's mind that no kid dared to swim in the lake without saying a prayer before jumping in. None of the stories bothered Tamaj or his father. "He's a beast, all right," Tamaj's dad had once said. "But he's no killer. When I had him on the line, I stared him right in the eye, and all I saw was fear." According to his father, that fish had bent his pole like a paperclip and nearly yanked him out of the boat before the line broke. All around town, people knew of the story. To believers, his father was sort of famous for being the only person to see and hook the monster. "We'll get him, Dad," Tamaj said with equal determination. But deep inside, catching the monster didn't matter much to Tamaj. He just loved their fishing trips. There was something special about being on the lake with his father before most of the town woke up. Tamaj could eat all the junk food he wanted, listen to good music on their old radio, and just sit without a care in the world. Dad did most of the real work when it came to the fishing part. Dad started the motor and switched on the radio. The oldie station was playing the Beatles. Perfect. Dad grinned. "Tamaj, the weather is hot. The monster loves his warm water warm." We couldn't have asked for better conditions. They motored out to the spot where the Wallamaloo River dumped into the lake. "He likes the action of the water," Dad explained. "Keeps the food marching right into his big mouth." Once Dad cut off the motor, he got his line ready. Already there were a few boats out, trolling for their own catch of the day. Tamaj recognized Leonard and his son Paolo's fancy motorboat several hundred yards away. Dad tipped his fishing hat in Leonard's direction, and Leonard tipped his hat in return. "That Leonard is going to eat my bait," Dad said under his breath, "when the monster is on my dinner plate tonight." Tamaj held back a laugh. Dad always called his old high school classmate "that Leonard," even though everyone else called him Leo. Leonard was known for being the best sports fisherman around. Last year, he and his son caught the biggest muskie that the state had ever seen. But to Tamaj's father, the 58-pound fish they hooked still wasn't the monster. All day, Dad cast and recast his line, but as the hours went by, the fun day Tamaj had hoped they would have wasn't so fun at all. Dad had hardly said a word. It was like he had pinned all his hopes on catching that fish this very morning. To make matters worse, they didn't get a nibble from anything at all, which was unusual. Tamaj wiped the sweat from his brow. Maybe it was too warm to fish. He glanced at his watch. It was past noon. Usually they quit for lunch and waited until dusk to head out again. Some of the other boats were already heading back, including Leonard's. "Brian!" Leonard called to Tamaj's father as they coasted by with the engine rumbling. "Just a tip. It's the radio. You're chasing away the monster with that music." "You fish your way," Dad called, "and I'll fish mine." Just then, something tugged on Dad's line, hard. Dad held it fast and started reeling. "See?" he said to Leonard, his pole jerking again. "I've got a big one. Help me, Tamaj." Tamaj stood up. "What should I do?" The pole jerked forward once more. Leonard stopped his boat. "You need me, Brian?" "We've got this." Dad reeled the line as quickly as he could. "Just hold on to my waist, Tamaj." He bent the pole back to get some power over the fish. He feels huge, bigger than I remember. Talmage grabbed onto his father and planted his feet in the decking. He's putting up a good fight. Dad bent the pole back again. Sure enough, whatever Dad had was rising to the surface. It was big, a dark gray mass about 3 feet wide coming toward the boat. Talmage's eyes widened. What was that? Dad tugged and reeled. Talmage dug in with his heels. On 1, 2, 3, pull! Talmage pulled on his dad as hard as he could. He lost his footing and his father landed on him. Something big came out of the water. The monster, Talmage thought. Bang! A giant tire hit the side of the boat before sinking under with a splash. Talmage heard peals of laughter from Leonard's boat, and his face flushed red. His father scrambled to his feet and cut the line with his pocket knife. Talmage sat up, rubbing his back. That was no monster. Stop laughing, Paolo, Leonard warned. It's not that funny. But Talmage could tell that Leonard was holding back his own chuckle. The man revved the motor to a roar. We'll see you later, Brian. And with that, they sped off. Talmage's dad dropped his pole and took off his hat. He chucked the hat to the deck. Talmage stared at the hat, and then he looked at his father. You okay? Dad took a few seconds to compose himself. Yeah. He looked at the horizon and finally picked up the hat. We're heading home. He yanked on the motor pool. That evening, Dad didn't say much. He sat in the living room in his tattered wingback chair, staring at the empty fireplace like it was a TV set. Talmage tried to cheer him up. Come on, Dad. It was Leonard's loud and obnoxious boat that ran the monster off. We'll get him tonight. I just know it. His father didn't say anything. Talmage began to worry. He'd never seen him this down over fishing. Dad? Talmage, his father began. You know my story about the monster, right? You said it was the best day of your life, Talmage recalled. No one had ever done what you had. Hook the monster. Right, Dad said. It was the best day of my life. I had the right weather, the right tackle, the right fishing spot. I had taken Grandpa's boat out all by myself. Talmage nodded, remembering the details of the story. But I never told you that that day was also my worst. Grandpa didn't believe me when I told him I had hooked the monster. Talmage frowned. His own dad hadn't believed him? And I saw the way Leonard and Paolo looked at us today. It wasn't just me they were laughing at. It was us. Who cares? Talmage said. We're catching the monster, Dad. You had him, and I believe you. Dad's face grew stern. Talmage, it's over. Trying to catch a fish I haven't seen in 20 years is impossible. He shook his head. Impossible. Now I sound like Dad. Talmage stared at his father. He didn't like to see him act this way. The funny thing is, Dad continued, when I had the monster on the line, the radio was playing Grandpa's favorite song. I remember wishing so badly that he could have been there with me. What a moment we would have had. He began to sing. You put the hours in and the day is done. It's quitting time. But when it comes to getting what you want, from the moon to the sun, you never give up and you never give in. Grandpa wasn't a believer in the monster like some of the townsfolk here, but to his credit, he was a big believer in me. He taught me to never give up in life and to go after what I wanted. Dad got up from the chair, and I wanted that fish. But it's time to stop. I'm not going to let you follow in my footsteps, not this way. He sighed. I give up. He ruffled Talmage's hair and headed to his bedroom. Night, son. That evening, as Talmage laid in bed, he thought about what his father had said and how sad his father had looked. Talmage made a silent vow to the monster and to his father. His dad had given up, but he hadn't. He was going to catch that fish once and for all, and he spent the entire night thinking about how he was going to do it. On Monday, Talmage pretended to sleep while he waited for his dad to go to work. As soon as Talmage heard the front door shut, he jumped out of bed with a notebook in his hand. He got dressed and grabbed everything he needed from the shed where they kept the fishing supplies. He loaded the motorboat and headed out. When he arrived at the mouth of the river, he opened his notebook and looked over a matrix he had drawn. 3 columns were labeled bait, location, and weather. Each row represented a time of day. He knew Dad had always tried to fish for the monster by looking for conditions that were similar to the day his father had hooked the fish. But after 20 years, Talmage figured it was time to try something new. What if the fish didn't like Dad's lure anymore or preferred a different spot? Tamaj figured if he noted the weather and methodically changed the variables that he could control, like the bait and the location, he would eventually discover the right combo and nab the fish. Tamaj filled in the first row in the matrix. Chartreuse crankbait, mouth of river, warm and sunny. For company, Tamaj switched on the radio. He adjusted his baseball cap and cast his line. If anyone was going to catch the monster, it would be him now that he had the system. Tamaj smiled. That month of June, Tamaj tried different lures at all times of day at the mouth of Wallamaloo River. He grabbed every chance he could to fish, usually when his father was at work, fast asleep, or out for a ride on his motorcycle, something his dad did a lot since he gave up on the monster. By the end of the month, Tamaj's notebook was 1/3 full of entries, but still no monster. Nevertheless, Tamaj's determination didn't flag. He still had dozens of locations to try. Tamaj began fishing at Quarry's Cove, Gilman's Point, and Wheaton's Dock. He swapped out the lures and fished in all sorts of weather, rain, wind, and scorching heat. Still no monster. By the end of summer, the notebook looked beat up. It was full, and Tamaj was beginning to wonder if he was meant to catch the fish after all. On the last weekend before school began, Tamaj sat on his bed and mulled over the entries in his notebook. Was there any combination he hadn't tried? His father knocked, and the door opened. Tamaj, have you seen my fishing pole? Tamaj quickly closed his notebook. Dad's pole. He had been so eager to get to bed last night he hadn't put it away. It was in the boat. No? His father scratched his head. I know I stored it in the shed ages ago, but it's not there. I wanted to sell it. Sell it? Yeah. A flicker of sadness crossed his father's face. No sense in keeping it. Someone must have taken it, he sighed. It's just as well. After Dad left, Tamaj stared at his notebook. He didn't know how much longer he could stand seeing his father miserable over the monster. He opened the notebook and studied the last few pages again. He had to find a way. As he scanned the entries, a new possibility came to him. Tamaj's heart sped up a little as he thought it over. There was one more combination that he hadn't tried. That evening, when his father was asleep, Tamaj went out on the boat, more determined than ever. He motored out to the mouth of the river and threw on Dad's old lure. He never thought to use Dad's lure and go to the same old spot. What if it wasn't the bait or the location, but the fishermen? Dad had said the fish had looked scared of him, but the monster didn't know Tamaj. It was worth a try. Tamaj flipped on the radio and cast his line. He waited patiently, knowing that this was his last hope. Over and over again, he cast his line and reeled it in. Hours went by with the stars twinkling above, and eventually, Tamaj couldn't ignore the sinking feeling growing in his stomach. He began to hate fishing, the monster, and his vow to catch the fish. A Beatles song came on the radio, and it instantly brought Tamaj back to the day that he and his dad had caught a monster all right, a monster of a tire. Funny how a song can bring you right back to the moment, Tamaj thought. Paolo's laughter, Dad chucking the hat. He'd never forget that day. It had started out great, and then it quickly became one of the worst days of his life. Just like the day his father had hooked the monster. What a curse! Tamaj straightened. Wait a second. Just like the day his father had hooked the monster, he reeled in the line and turned on the motor. He had to get back to the house, and quick. He burst through the door of his father's bedroom. Wake up, Dad. We have an appointment with the monster. His dad sat up in bed and squinted at Tamaj. What are you talking about? Tamaj tugged at his father. We have to try one more thing. Tamaj, what on earth? But Tamaj wouldn't let his father stay in bed. He wouldn't let him give up. He made him get dressed and dragged him outside. Today is the day, Tamaj said. I just know it. The sky was still dark, but soon it would welcome dawn. Hurry, Dad, it's almost 6. As Tamaj started the boat, he made his father look at the notebook. Tamaj filled him in on the way to the mouth of the Wallamaloo River. See, Dad, all summer I've been trying every possible thing to catch the monster, but we know the monster isn't some ordinary fish, yet we've been acting as though he thinks and behaves like one. That doesn't make any sense. His father listened as they went to the spot where they usually fished. He's not any old fish attracted by regular old lures. Tamaj cut off the motor and pointed at the radio. What was that song, Dad? What was Grandpa's favorite song? Sing it. Tamaj's dad stared at Tamaj in disbelief. What? Sing the song. Tamaj tried to remember the words. Something about the moon and sun. Tamaj's father stared at his son. Oh, what do we have to lose? He looked at that deep, murky water. The moonlight shone over its surface, and he began to sing. When the hours are in and the day is done, it's quittin' time. But when it comes to gettin' what you want from the moon to the sun, Talmage joined in. You never give up, you never give in. The lake grew eerily quiet. For a moment, it seemed like the lake was listening. Again, Talmage whispered. When the hours are in, they sang. The boat suddenly began to shift. Small waves formed in the water. Talmage, his father said. Talmage kept singing. Get the pole, Dad. We don't need the pole, his dad said. I think he's coming right to us. Talmage stared at the growing ripples in the water. His father was right. Keep singing, Talmage whispered. Neither of them dared to move. From the moon to the sun, the ripples grew even larger. The monster was coming. You never give up. Something began to rise from the surface just as rays of sunlight hit the water. Talmage could feel the boat rise from the force of the waves, and what emerged was bigger than anything Talmage could have imagined. He swallowed. You never give in. And then he saw it. The monster's brilliant emerald green head, the dark orb of his eye. The eye was so big, Talmage could see himself and his dad in its glassy reflection. Talmage could hardly breathe, but he wasn't scared. Neither was the monster. There you are, Talmage's father whispered. Then, as quickly as the fish had come, it slipped into the water with a splash that echoed across the lake. The boat rocked from its wake. Talmage and his father stood in silence as the lake grew still again. Then Talmage realized something dreadful. Dad, we didn't catch him. His father put his arm around Talmage's shoulder. It's okay. Talmage stared at the spot where the monster had been. Who's going to believe us? Doesn't matter, Dad said. I got what I wanted. Talmage wrinkled his face. No, you didn't. His father looked at him. Talmage, all I wanted to show you was that if you don't give up, anything is possible. But you know what? What? You just did that for me instead. He gave Talmage's shoulder a squeeze. With those words, Talmage gazed at the lake again. His father was right. It was one of the best days of his life, and the deep, murky water of Wallamalu Lake was as clear as it could ever be.